For 10 years, Elijah Brooks fixed what Victoria Sterling broke. Every defective engine her company quietly buried, the ones that failed emissions, the ones that cracked under pressure, the ones that would have ended careers if they had surfaced, ended up in crates at the back of his garage. No press, no paper trail, just Elijah, his tools, and a daughter who fell asleep to the sound of wrenches. He never complained. He kept every record. And when Victoria Sterling's empire finally collapsed under the weight of its own lies, she had nowhere left to go but his door. He fixed everything she broke. Now she needs him to fix the one thing she cannot, her truth. The town of Milbrook, Ohio, did not ask much of the people who lived there. It asked for work and patience, and the good sense to know when something was worth keeping. Brooks Auto Repair sat at the corner of Maple and 9th Street. A one-story building with a green tin roof that rattled faintly in wind and a hand-painted sign that had never been replaced since the day Elijah hung it. The paint had faded to a soft olive, and the letters listed slightly to the left, but Elijah had never bothered to fix it. There were more important things to fix. He was up before 6 every morning. The alarm was unnecessary. His body had learned the hour the way a mechanic learns an engine from the inside out by feel. He made coffee in the same chipped mug he had used for 9 years, dressed in the dark, and then went down the hall to his daughter's room. He was a tall, broad-shouldered black man with calloused hands and a quiet way of moving, the kind of stillness that suggested a person who had spent most of his life listening before he spoke. In that small house, his steps never woke her. Maya was 6 years old with a tangle of dark curls that fought the hairbrush every single morning, and a stuffed bear she called Bolt that went everywhere she went. Elijah would sit on the edge of her bed with a small jar of coconut oil and a wide-toothed comb, the same tools his own mother had once used on his sisters, and he would work through the curls in sections the way she had taught him, slowly from the ends up, patient with every knot. She would wake up slowly, eyes still half closed, one hand already reaching for Bolt. He had learned over the years that doing a little girl's hair was its own kind of love language. It said, "I am here, I am not rushing, you are worth this time." He had promised himself the first night he had come home from the hospital alone with her that he would learn it properly. He had kept that promise. You know, there's something people rarely talk about when they talk about fatherhood. It's not the big moments, the graduations, the recitals, the first days of school. It's the small, invisible labor, the hairbrushing, the lunch packing, the same bedtime story read for the 47th time. A father who shows up for those moments is building something that no speech can build. Every curl combed with patience is a quiet sentence that says, "You matter." And children hear those sentences long after they forget the words. "Sterling trucks today?" Maya asked one morning, not looking up the way children ask questions they already know the answer to. Elijah tied the last strand of her hair. Probably. He dropped her at Grace Hendrick's house at 6. Grace was 53, lived 2 blocks away, and had worked as his bookkeeper since the 2nd year he opened. She had no children of her own and had quietly filled a space in Maya's life that neither of them had ever named out loud. Then Elijah walked back to the shop, unlocked the rolling gate, and began his day. In the shop, he had an old cassette player on a shelf behind the workbench. It played Bill Withers and Sam Cooke, and sometimes when the weather was cold, Nina Simone. His father had kept the same tapes in the same kind of shop 60 miles south, back when Elijah was small enough to sit on an overturned oil bucket and pass his father the wrong wrench on purpose just to hear him laugh. That laugh was one of the first sounds Elijah had ever learned to love. His father had been gone for 15 years now, but the tapes remained, and the rhythm of the work was the same rhythm Elijah had grown up inside. The Sterling Automotive Group occupied a 40-story glass tower in downtown Columbus, 40 miles east of Milbrook. Victoria Sterling had taken the company from her father at 31 and had spent the 5 years since then building it into something her father would not have recognized. She was at her desk by 7:30 every morning in a black blazer with the quarterly projections already loaded on the screen behind her. Meetings did not start late. Decisions did not linger. The word around the company was that Victoria Sterling had 2 speeds forward and faster. But every Thursday, a gray cargo van with Sterling Parts Division stenciled on the side panel drove the 40 miles to Milbrook and stopped at Brooks Auto Repair. The driver, always a different one, always quiet, would unload between 3 and 7 engine units from the back, leave a small sealed envelope on top of the stack, and drive away. The envelope contained cash and a single sheet with a parts return reference number, no signature beyond a rubber stamp, no official invoice, just the engines and the envelope, and the understanding that Elijah Brooks would not ask questions. He had learned not to ask questions. That lesson had been expensive. Grace Hendricks watched him receive the delivery that Thursday morning from the doorway of the shop, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She was holding a manila folder. "The VAP they sent last week," she said. When the van had gone, I pulled the manufacturing code. "It's the 3rd unit from the same production batch in 5 months." Elijah crouched beside the nearest engine, pressing 2 fingers along the cylinder wall. He did not answer right away. "I know," he said finally. "I labeled the other 2 the same way." Grace opened the folder and held it out. Inside were photographs, handwritten analysis notes, and a printed sheet with production codes highlighted in yellow marker. She had been doing this quietly on her own time because she was the kind of person who believed that things should be documented, even when the documentation served no immediate purpose. Elijah took the folder and looked at it for a long moment. "Put it with the others," he said. He had said those same words hundreds of times over 10 years, and Grace had always complied, and neither of them had ever discussed what the others were for, but they both knew. The back storage room of Brooks Auto Repair held 5 large filing cabinets. Each one painted a particular shade of pale blue that Elijah had chosen without knowing exactly why. The color was almost the same as the inside of the break room at the Sterling Automotive Engineering Facility, where he had worked for 12 years, the room where he had eaten lunch and written reports, and once on a Tuesday in March 11 years ago, had argued with a man named Richard Kane about a structural fault in the HX4 engine series. Elijah Brooks had been a senior engine design engineer at Sterling Automotive before he had been a garage owner. He had been one of 3 black engineers in his division, and he had learned early that the margin for error for a man like him was not the same as the margin for everyone else. He worked harder. He documented more. He double-checked the work that other engineers were allowed to sign off on in one pass. This was not a complaint. It was just a fact he had absorbed the way you absorb the weather of the place you live. He had been good at the work, not good in the way that earns compliments in hallways, but good in the quiet, precise way that keeps machines from failing. The HX4 had been largely his. The combustion chamber geometry, the valve timing sequence, the particular alloy composition in the cylinder wall. He had worked on those problems for 2 years, and when the engine went to production, his name had been on the internal design documents. Then his wife Nicole had been killed in a car accident on a Tuesday evening in November. Maya was 8 months old. Nicole had been a high school math teacher with a laugh that filled rooms and a way of humming while she cooked that Elijah still sometimes caught himself listening for. There was a photograph of her on the kitchen windowsill holding Maya on the day they had brought her home from the hospital, Nicole in a yellow sweater, smiling at something off camera that nobody else had seen. Elijah had taken emergency leave, then extended leave, and when he finally surfaced again, the company had restructured. Richard Kane, who had been deputy director of the product division, had quietly removed Elijah's name from the patent filings and reassigned design credit to a team that Elijah had never led. By the time Elijah understood what had happened, he had no money for lawyers and no energy to fight. He opened the garage instead. There is a particular kind of injustice that happens not with a bang, but with a shrug. A name erased from a document, a credit quietly reassigned, a man too tired from grief to notice in time. The world does not always steal from us with force. Sometimes it just waits for us to be weak, and then it moves the furniture while we sleep. And the hardest part is not the theft itself. The hardest part is realizing years later that the thieves counted on your grief. They factored it in. The first Sterling delivery had arrived 14 months later. He had understood immediately what it meant. The engines, being quietly outsourced to a small-town repair shop, were not standard wear and tear returns. They were units with systematic faults, the same fault he had flagged in a technical report in the spring before his leave, a report that Richard Kane had signed for, and then made disappear. Someone inside Sterling was using Elijah's garage as a disposal route, pulling the defective units from the internal inventory before any regulatory audit could flag them and dispersing them to third-party shops where they would be quietly repaired or scrapped with no paper trail leading back to the company. Elijah was the third-party shop. He had the technical knowledge to handle the units without asking the wrong questions, and he had the need for money. And Richard Kane knew both of those things very well. So Elijah had taken the envelopes. He had done the work. And every single time he had written down everything: the unit code, the batch number, the fault pattern, the date, received the cost of materials, his analysis of the root cause, and he had filed it in the blue cabinets, one folder per delivery organized by year. He had done it because he was a person who did not throw away data, and because somewhere beneath the exhaustion of raising a small child alone and running a small business alone, he had always believed, without quite articulating it, that the data would matter someday. He sat at his workbench late the night after Grace brought him the new folder, with Maya asleep down the hall and a single lamp burning over the cabinet row. The stools in the shop were old, and the floor was cold, and the overhead fluorescent had been flickering for 3 weeks because he kept forgetting to change it. He ran his thumb across the tabs of the current year's folders, 6 years of batch numbers that matched the fault series he had documented in the report Richard Kane had buried. 10 years of evidence that the problem had never been fixed, only hidden. He did not feel righteous about it. He felt tired in the particular way of a man who has been carrying weight that was never his to carry and who has never once set it down, because setting it down would mean abandoning the only honest thing he had left. He closed the cabinet and went to check on Maya. The news broke on a Wednesday morning in October. Elijah was replacing a brake caliper on a customer's truck when Grace came out of the office holding her phone at arm's length, as though the screen contained something that required distance. 340,000 vehicles, she said. 7 accidents, 2 of them serious. Elijah set down the caliper. He already knew which vehicles. He already knew which engine series. He already knew because he had been writing it down for 10 years. He looked up at the row of blue filing cabinets visible through the open door of the storage room, and for the first time in a very long while, he let himself feel what he had been carrying. Here is something I have come to believe about patience, and I think Elijah would understand it even if he would never say it out loud. Patience is not the same thing as waiting. Waiting is passive. Waiting is hoping something will come to you. Patience is active. Patience is what you do when you have already decided that the truth matters more than how long the truth takes. A patient man is not a slow man. He is a man who refuses to let the clock decide what is real. If you are going through a season where nothing you have done seems to have mattered, yet keep your records, keep your receipts, keep your word to yourself. The ones who quietly keep their own integrity while the world forgets them are the ones who eventually the world has to come back to. Inside the glass tower in Columbus, the collapse was not slow. It happened the way structural failures happen invisibly for a long time, and then all at once. The recall announcement triggered an investigation. The investigation surfaced internal communications, and within 72 hours the stock had dropped 60%, and the phones had stopped ringing in the ordinary way and started ringing in the other way, the way that meant lawyers. Victoria Sterling sat in her office at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night with the lights off and the city below her going about its business as though nothing particular had happened. She had read every document her legal team had sent in the last 3 days. She had read the recall filings, the accident reports, the preliminary investigation summary, and she had read this was the part that kept returning to her, a memo from 2012 written by a senior engineer named Elijah Brooks, warning the product division about a fault in the HX4 combustion chamber wall that could cause progressive cracking under sustained load conditions. The memo had been received and signed for by Richard Kane. It had never reached her desk. Her attorney, a compact, precise woman named Diana Cole, had called that afternoon with a single-pointed assessment. To survive what was coming, Victoria needed an independent technical witness, Someone who could demonstrate from outside the company's own record-keeping that the fault was structural and long-standing, and that the decision to conceal it had been made below the executive level. The only person outside Sterling Automotive who had handled the relevant engines and who had the technical background to speak to their fault patterns was Elijah Brooks. Diana had found his name in a parts return reference file that one of the associates had pulled during document review. The reference was years old and led nowhere except to a repair shop in a small town 40 miles west. The next morning, Victoria Sterling drove herself to Milbrook. She had not driven herself anywhere in 4 years. Elijah was lying beneath a pickup truck when the black sedan pulled into his lot. He heard the door open and close and the particular sound of heels on concrete, not the uncertain tap of someone unfamiliar with garages, but a deliberate, measured sound. He slid out from beneath the truck and stood up, wiping his hands on a rag that had long since given up being clean. Bill Withers was playing low on the cassette player behind him, Lean on Me, the part where the piano carries the whole weight of the song. She looked different than the photograph in the business section. The blazer was the same quality, but the posture was not. Her hair was done, but not recently. There were shadows under her eyes that suggested the kind of fatigue that sleep does not fix. "Elijah Brooks," she said. It was not a question. "I know who you are," he said. He did not extend the hand. 10 years I've been receiving your company's broken engines. Just never had anybody call them that out loud." The sentence landed the way he intended it to, not as an attack, but as a fact. Victoria Sterling had come prepared for many things. She had not come prepared for a man who did not need to be impressed by her. She told him what she needed: a technical witness, an independent voice, documentation showing that the fault was designed in, not decided, in that it predated her tenure, that it was structural, that someone had known about it and concealed it deliberately. Elijah listened without interrupting. Then he said, "What are you offering?" She told him a number. He looked out the open garage door to where Grace Hendricks was walking Maya in slow circles in the lot, the little girl's hand in hers, Bolt tucked under her other arm. "That's not what I need," he said. "Then what?" He turned back and looked at her, not unkindly, but with the directness of someone who had spent a decade in a room with the truth and could not pretend otherwise. "I need you to sit down and look at 10 years of records with me," he said. "And I need you to tell me when you're done whether you actually knew." She did not answer immediately. The moment held. Then Maya pushed open the side door from the lot and looked between them with the cheerful curiosity of a 6-year-old who has not yet learned that some rooms are tense. "Daddy," she said, "is she here to get a car fixed? Or did she break one?" Elijah's mouth moved in something that was not quite a smile. "Go back with Grace, sweetheart." Maya studied Victoria for one more moment with enormous dark eyes, then retreated. The door swung shut. The blue filing cabinets took up the entire back wall of the storage room and a portion of the side wall. Victoria stood in the doorway for a moment before she stepped inside. Elijah opened the first cabinet, the one labeled with the year that the first delivery had arrived. He pulled a folder and set it on the workbench. Photographs, handwritten sheets, printed analysis forms. Every item dated, every item signed. "This one came in on a Tuesday in February," he said. "Batch code 7743, Echo, combustion chamber wall. Hairline fracture consistent with the fault pattern I documented in the internal report I wrote in March of the year before." He set his finger on a line of the handwritten notes. "I recognized it the first time I saw it. I had designed that engine. I knew exactly which tolerance had been compromised." Victoria leaned in. She could read the batch codes. She had spent 3 days reading batch codes. "This code," she said slowly, "this is in the recall list. Most of them are." He moved to the next cabinet. "I have records going back 10 years. Every unit, every batch code, every fault analysis. All of it cross-referenced to the original HX4 design file, which I kept a personal copy of because it was my work." He said it without bitterness. It was simply true. Victoria sat down on the old stool beside the workbench. She picked up one of the folders from the middle years and began reading. Elijah did not rush her. He stood at the other end of the table with his arms crossed and let her work through it at her own pace. It took almost 2 hours. By the time she set the last folder down, her expression had changed in ways that were difficult to name. She looked like someone who had been carrying a version of a story for a long time and had just been handed a different version, one that matched the facts in ways hers had not. "Richard received your original report," she said, "before your leave." "Yes." And then the engines started coming here. 14 months after I left, first delivery was 3 engines. Same batch series, same fault. "He was sending them to you because—" She stopped. "Because I had the skills to handle them without asking the right questions," Elijah said. "And because he knew I needed the money. And because if anything ever surfaced, a garage owner who had been receiving cash payments off the books would be a much worse witness than a CFO." He paused. "And because a black man in a small town with no lawyer and a young child to feed is the kind of witness that certain rooms assume they can make disappear. Richard counted on that too. He just didn't know me as well as he thought." Victoria was quiet for a long time. Through the storage room wall, they could hear the faint sound of Maya singing something tuneless to herself in the lot. "How old is she?" Victoria asked. 6. A silence with weight in it. "I'm sorry," Victoria said. Elijah looked at her. "Are you apologizing to Maya or to me?" She did not answer right away, and that Elijah thought was at least an honest response. There's a version of this story where Elijah walks away at this moment, and honestly, nobody could blame him. Victoria's apology was real, but it was also late, 10 years late. And the thing about late apologies is that they don't undo anything. They only open a door. What matters is not the apology itself, but what the person walks through it to do. I think that's worth holding on to. When someone we love or someone who has wronged us finally offers something real, we don't have to accept it completely. We don't have to forgive instantly. But we can leave the door open a crack and see what they are willing to carry through it. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. She stayed in Milbrook. There was nowhere else to go. The media had her building surrounded, and her attorney had advised her not to return until the preliminary filing was complete. She took a room at the motel at the end of the main road and came to the shop every morning at 8. They worked through the records together, Elijah and Victoria and Grace, building a timeline that went from his original report in 2012 to the most recent delivery the previous month. Grace cross-referenced the batch codes against the published recall list with the careful focus of a person who has always believed that numbers properly kept will eventually tell the truth. On the second morning, Victoria picked up a socket wrench from the bench and held it at the wrong angle. Elijah did not say anything. He reached over and repositioned her hand, not demonstrating, just correcting the way he would with anyone new to the shop. She registered the adjustment without comment. She was not accustomed to being corrected without explanation, but she was beginning to understand that some things in this building were communicated differently. Maya started calling her the lady with the good coat and dirty hands, which was accurate. One afternoon, Maya brought Victoria a small cup of sweet tea, the way Grace had taught her to make it, which was the way Grace had learned from her own grandmother in Alabama. And Victoria, who had not drunk sweet tea since her childhood and had forgotten it even existed, held the cup for a long moment before she drank it. She said thank you more quietly than she had said thank you to anyone in years. On the 4th afternoon, Victoria asked him quietly whether he had ever considered coming forward earlier. When Maya was 3, he said, "I had maybe $400 in a savings account and a box of records that I would have needed a law firm to present properly. Richard Kane had a full legal department. I did the math." He was not asking for sympathy. He was providing data. "That's the thing about systems like the one you ran," he said. He was not looking at her, just working the calibration gauge on the engine in front of him. "They don't have to threaten you directly. They just have to make the alternative impossible. And then they wait." She did not say anything for a while. "I never knew about any of this," she said finally. "I want you to know that. I know it doesn't change." "I believe you," Elijah said. He put down the gauge. "That might be the worst part of it, not that you knew. that the system was organized specifically so that you wouldn't have to. She sat with that for the rest of the afternoon. Richard Kane called her that evening at 7:45. She was sitting in the parking lot of the motel with the phone on speaker watching the street. "I know where you are," he said. "I know what you're doing." His voice carried the particular steadiness of a man who had spent a career maintaining control and believed still that control was recoverable. "Don't let that mechanic destroy what we built." "What you built," Victoria said. "What we built together." A pause. "Think carefully." She ended the call. By morning, the story had shifted. A newswire had published a short item sourced anonymously describing Elijah Brooks as a repair shop owner with a history of receiving unreported cash payments from a major automotive company, suggesting that his anticipated testimony was financially compromised. The item was short, but it circulated. By 10 o'clock, 2 of his regular customers had called Grace to cancel their appointments. Elijah read the item on his phone standing in the driveway of the shop. Then he put the phone in his pocket and went back inside and started on the day's work. Grace found him an hour later. "What do you want to do?" "Keep working," he said. Notice what he didn't do. He didn't call anyone. He didn't post anything. He didn't spend the morning defending himself on a screen to strangers who had already made up their minds. He just kept working. There is something in that instinct that I find almost holy. When the world tells a lie about you, the temptation is to rush out and correct it to explain to prove. But there is another option, and it is usually the right one. Keep being the person the lie says you aren't. Day after day, oil change after oil change, bedtime story after bedtime story. The lie runs out of air eventually. The life does not. Let your life be your answer. Victoria arrived at 9 and told him directly what Richard's team had done. The tax records from 2019 that showed he had underreported income from the Hendersons. Not fraud in any meaningful sense, just a man who could not afford a careful accountant during the worst year of his business. But on paper, it could be framed as something worse. "You should know," she said. "If this gets worse, if he finds more..." "Then it gets worse," Elijah said. "I didn't do anything wrong. I did something messy because my life was messy. There's a difference." He looked at her. "If you need to find a different witness," he said, "I understand. I'm not asking you to take this on for me." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "He's doing this because he's afraid of you. A man with 40 lawyers doesn't go digging through a garage owner's tax records because he's confident." Elijah did not answer. That evening, Maya asked him about the news item. She had heard Grace talking. She was 6, and she understood more than adults usually expected. "People said bad things about you," she said, not asking reporting. Elijah sat down on the porch step so they were the same height. He put his arm around her small shoulders, and she leaned into him the way she had since she was old enough to know what a father's shoulder was for. "Some people did," he said. "But I didn't do a bad thing. I did a slow thing. Sometimes the right thing takes a long time. And while you're waiting, it can look wrong to people who aren't waiting with you." Maya thought about this carefully. "Is Victoria waiting with you?" she asked. "I think she's starting to," Elijah said. It was Grace who found it. She had been going through the 2016 folders, the middle years, the ones Elijah had organized most densely, and she found it at 11:47 at night when Elijah had already gone home and she was supposed to have locked up an hour ago. She called him from the shop phone. "Come back," she said, "right now." The folder she showed him was from the 3rd week of March in 2016. Inside was a standard delivery receipt for a batch of 6 engine units. And stapled to the back of the receipt in a plain white envelope was a handwritten note on sterling automotive notepaper. The handwriting was Richard Kane's. Elijah had seen it on enough internal memos to recognize it without question. The note read, "Handle this. Do not log it in the system. RK." The batch code on the receipt matched a unit from a 2022 accident report. A man named David Patterson, 41 years old. 2 children had been driving a vehicle with that engine series when the fault caused the engine to lock under highway load. He had survived. He had not walked again. Elijah read the note twice. He set it flat on the workbench and looked at it under the lamp. Victoria arrived within 15 minutes. She stood at the workbench and read the note and did not say anything for a full minute. "He used your shop as a vault," she said quietly, "because he knew you would keep everything safe and never open it." "He thought I didn't have the key," Elijah said. The call to Diana Cole went out at midnight. By morning, the legal team was preparing the submission package for the federal investigation, 10 years of batch-coded repair records. The original 2012 design report, the 2016 note, and Elijah's formal technical analysis, linking every unit he had received to the fault pattern he had identified a decade earlier. Richard Kane arrived at Brooks Auto Repair the following Tuesday morning. He came alone, without an assistant, without a car service. He drove himself in a silver sedan and parked in the lot with the neatness of a man who still believed in the appearance of order. He was wearing a suit that cost more than a month of Elijah's earnings, and his expression was the expression of someone preparing to negotiate. Elijah was at the workbench. He did not stand up when Richard walked in. Richard made the offer without preamble. He was as precise about it as he was precise about everything. A specific sum. A specific ask the note from 2016, and Elijah's agreement to characterize the deliveries as routine contracted work rather than off-book disposal. In exchange, the tax issue would disappear, and the news item would retract. Elijah listened to all of it. Then he said, "Do you know the name David Patterson?" Richard said nothing. 41 years old, Elijah said. 2 kids. He was driving a vehicle with an engine from the batch your note came with. He didn't die, he can't walk. He picked up the calibration gauge from the bench and turned it in his hands, not doing anything with it, just holding it. "I read the local paper. I read it every week. I have for 10 years. I have a habit of keeping track of things people think nobody's watching." Richard tried once more. "You cannot win against my legal." "Get out of my shop," Elijah said. His voice did not change. "I have a customer coming in at 10. Richard Kane stood in the center of Brooks Auto Repair and looked at the room. The old tools on their pegboard hooks. The faded calendar on the wall. The small framed photograph of Maya at age 3, taped next to the parts phone. The photograph of Nicole in the yellow sweater on the shelf above the cassette player. The blue filing cabinets visible through the open storage room door. He looked at all of it and understood something that his position and his lawyers and his 40 years of cultivated leverage had never prepared him to face. A man who has nothing left to protect is a man you cannot threaten. He left without another word. Victoria had been standing at the side of the building. She had heard everything. When Elijah came out, she was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and her eyes on the middle distance. "He'll try something else," she said. "Probably," Elijah said. "It won't change what's in the cabinets." I want to linger here for a moment, because I think what just happened in that shop is something most of us are taught wrong about. We are told that power is won by having more money, more lawyers, more leverage, more volume. But Richard Kane walked into that garage with all of that and walked out empty-handed. And the reason is simple. Real strength is not what you can take. It is what cannot be taken from you. A man who has done the right thing quietly for a long time with nothing to show for it, that man has built a kind of wealth that no contract can touch. If you are building something honest in a season when nobody is watching, do not stop. You are not behind. You are laying a foundation that the loud people cannot see. And one day when the wind comes, you will be the one still standing. The federal hearing was held on a Thursday morning. Elijah arrived in khaki trousers and a white button-down shirt, not a suit, just clean clothes pressed with some care. He had ironed the shirt himself the night before, the way his mother had taught him when he was 12, collar first, then the yoke, then the sleeves. He carried the submission package in a standard banker's box, the kind that cost $3 at the office supply store. He sat at the witness table and he told the truth. He told it from the beginning. The original design work, the 2012 report, the restructuring, the first delivery, the 10 years of records, the note from 2016. He had organized his testimony the way he organized his maintenance logs, chronologically clearly without embellishment. When one of the committee members asked him why he had maintained such thorough documentation over a decade, he paused for a moment before answering. "Because I was an engineer at that company," he said. "Engineers don't discard data." It was a quiet sentence. It described 10 years. Diana Cole presented the technical analysis that afternoon. The batch code cross-references the timeline from 2012 to the present, the original fault report, and the note from 2016, Richard Kane's own handwriting on Sterling Company notepaper, instructing that a known defective batch be kept off the official log. When Richard Kane took the witness seat the following morning, he had 4 attorneys with him and a prepared statement that was 47 pages long. By the second hour of questioning, his account of who had known what and when had begun to contradict itself in ways that became increasingly difficult to reconcile. The gaps in his record-keeping, set against the completeness of Elijah's, told a story that 47 pages could not revise. The outcome came 3 weeks later. Richard Kane was referred for criminal prosecution on charges of evidence concealment and intentional safety violation cover-up. Victoria Sterling was formally removed from the list of primary subjects in the investigation. In the report's technical appendix, Elijah Brooks was cited as the provider of critical independent documentation without which the full scope of the concealment could not have been established. He read that sentence once, then folded the report and put it on the shelf above the workbench next to the framed photograph of Maya. The following month passed, the way most months passed at Brooks Auto Repair. The work was steady. A few new customers had come in after the news coverage, people who had read the story and felt that a shop run by a man like that was probably a shop that would not overcharge them, which was accurate. The old customers returned. The calendar on the wall was filled with oil changes and alignments and a transmission job that Elijah was actually looking forward to. Grace taped a sheet of paper to the front of the blue filing cabinets. It read, "Completed 2014 through 2024. She had found a blue marker that was almost exactly the same shade as the cabinets, which pleased her. Victoria came on a Friday afternoon 3 weeks before she was due back in Columbus to finalize the company's restructuring process. She wore a coat Elijah had not seen before, softer than her usual things, something she might have bought in Milbrook rather than packed from home. She was carrying a manila envelope. She gave it to him without a speech. Inside was a legal document, several pages formal in structure. His name appeared in the first paragraph. The document was a rights restoration agreement executed by the reconstituted Sterling Automotive Board, returning attribution credit on the HX4 engine series to its original designer. His name would be restored in the patent records and the engineering archive. Elijah read the first page, then the second. He stood at the workbench for a long moment with the document in both hands. "I can't give back 10 years, Victoria said. "I can give back your name." He folded the document carefully along its original crease and tucked it into the breast pocket of his work shirt. He did not say anything immediately. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of a room where something had been set down after a long time of being carried. "Did you learn anything?" he asked. "From all of this?" She thought about it. She gave it real consideration the way she had given the blue cabinet folders real consideration, and he respected that about her. "I learned," she said finally, "that the people who say the least are usually the ones holding the most." He nodded. A single slow nod that meant the answer was sufficient. Maya came running from the back of the lot where she had been drawing something with chalk on the old concrete pad. She hit Elijah at waist height without slowing down, arms wrapping his midsection, and then looked up at Victoria with the candid assessment of a 6-year-old. "You're leaving today," she said. "I am," Victoria said. She crouched down to Maya's level, which was something she had not done easily 3 weeks ago. "But I'll remember this place." Maya considered this with the gravity she brought to most important things. "Remember it right," she said. "This is where my dad fixes cars. It's not where people drop off broken things and forget about them." Victoria looked at her for a moment, and then at Elijah, and then back at the little girl. "I know," she said quietly. "I know the difference now." Elijah walked her to the car. The afternoon light was low and gold across the green tin roof. She shook his hand, not the elaborate gesture of a deal being sealed, just the ordinary gesture of one person acknowledging another. He watched the black car pull out of the lot and turn east back toward Columbus and the glass tower and the work of rebuilding things that had been broken for a long time. Then he went back inside. Maya was waiting for him at the workbench. He lifted her up onto the stool and pressed a kiss to the top of her head where the curls were still neat from this morning's careful work. For 10 years, Victoria Sterling had used the back lot of Brooks Auto Repair as a place to set down the things she did not want to carry. What she had never understood was that Elijah Brooks had picked up every single one of those things. Not because he had to, not because it benefited him, not because he planned any particular use for them, but because he was the kind of man who did not walk past something broken without taking note of where the damage was and what it meant and whether anyone would ever be able to use it to find the truth. He had been right that it would matter someday. He had just never known how patient someday would require him to be. And so we come to the end, and I want to say one last thing gently because Elijah would not want it said loudly. Most of us will never sit at a federal hearing. Most of us will never see a man like Richard Kane walk into our workplace and walk out defeated. Most of our battles will be smaller than that and quieter, and nobody will ever write them down. But the principle is the same. Do the work. Keep your records not of other people's failings, but of your own faithfulness. Brush your child's hair with patience. Show up for the people who cannot repay you. Tell the truth in rooms where the truth is inconvenient, even if you have to whisper it. And when the world forgets who you are, do not spend your life trying to remind it. Spend your life being it. The people who matter will remember, and the ones who don't, well, one day they will come looking. And you will already be there at the workbench exactly who you always said you were. That is a life worth building. That is a name worth keeping. And that, I think, is the quiet miracle of a man like Elijah Brooks.